Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Mem Hey in Bava Kama. Daf Mem Hey in Bava Kama. As we'll complete the parak. We're going to start with the we'll start with the Gemara at the bottom of Mem Dalam base. But let's see the Mishnah quickly again. Shor Yotze Bisakel. Shor was being taken out to be stoned. In other words, the verdict had been he had been sentenced already to death. And now the owner was makdish the animal, sanctified it, ain't a mukdish, because it's not his anymore. It's asur b'hana. He can't be makdish it, and there would be no me'ilah. The animal, it's meat. What he's done is meat. And shachto, if he slaughtered the basar also, we had that before. You can't eat the meat because it's asur b'hana. Ve'imad shelo nigmar dino hikdish. Let's say before the verdict took place, even while they went to court, but the verdict hadn't taken place. If the owner had sanctified it to the base of Mikdash, mukdash, and you would be moel if you would commit sacrilege if you had enough. Im shachtan v'shachtan, it's mutter. Now the Mishnah says this Mishnah is really going on with the next Mishnah. But now the Gemara talks about it. Let's say you gave your animal to a shomer. Different kinds of shomer. You know, shamachinim, shavasachar. Here he says the shamachinim, the shoel, and the sachar. The four kinds of sachrim. One is unpaid. That's a shamachinim. Those are sachar. He's paid a hired hand to watch it. A shoel is a person who borrows it but has even more responsibility, and a socher is a renter. As a shaila, if a socher has a halacha like a shemachinim or not, we'll talk about that. But in any of them, if you gave over the animal to a shomer, he now takes responsibility. Nichnesu tachas habalim. He's responsible now. If the animal does damage, he has to pay for a tam chatzi nezik, for a mued nezik sholem. But in other words, the owner is now absolved of responsibility. Muad mishal nezik sholem, tam mishal chatzi nezik. That's what the Mishnah says. Before we get to explain, first the Gemara is going to explain the first part of the Mishnah. Before we get to the second part of the Mishnah, we're going to look at the next Mishnah, because the next Mishnah on Memham and base is really a continuation of the latter part of this Mishnah. Tanur Rabbanan, Shor Shahemis, if a Shor killed somebody, Ad Shol Nigmar Dino, before the judgment was taken, the verdict was issued, Machro Machor. If he sold the animal, it's sold. So sell it. You can use it for whatever you want, even for plowing, whatever you want to do. It's sold. The sentence hasn't been passed yet. Therefore, the owner's still the owner. If he sold it, you should have checked it before. You're going to have complaints when you find out the animal is actually supposed to go to court. Then you're going to have a sentence against him, but he hasn't been sentenced yet. It's sold. If he was makdish, if the owner sanctified it, it's sanctified. Shachta bas and mutter. If he shechted it, still the mutter. That was the animal still 100%. The owner of the belongs to the owner. He can do whatever he wants. There's zero shomer lebase ba'alav. Let's say the shomer was watching it, right, and the animal did damage. It was going to be taken to court, but meanwhile the shomer returned it to the owner. Muhser. He says, "Look, I'm done. I returned it." Even though later on it's going to be called to court, it's going to be subpoenaed. He's going to be support, but I've done my job. That's what the Tanakh had. Mishanig Mardina, but once sentence has been passed, Machar and Machar, you can't sell it. Ishan and Mukdash, it's not sanctified. If you had Shachto Basar Osir, if you shechted it, you can't eat the meat. So I had an animal and I gave it to a shomer. The shomer was negligent and the animal went and did damage. And then the animal was taken to court, and the shomer was still responsible for it, and the animal was sentenced to death. Now the shomer grabs the animal and gives it back to the owner and says, "Here, I'm returning your animal. That you can't do anymore. Can't do it." Shomer the base mal animal. That's what Tanakama says. Rabbi Yaakov Omer af mishenig merdino echziru shomer lebal muchzer. Rabbi Yaakov says even after the animal's been sentenced, you can return it, and you don't have to pay anymore, even though you're returning an animal which is sentenced to death. What's the machlokas? Maybe this is machlokas. The Rabbanan say when it comes to something that's asur, I can't say I'm returning it to you. It's asur. When I took it, I took a good animal. Now you can't have any at all from it. Can I say that? The Rabbanan say you can't say that. Rabbi Yaakov said, this is the animal I took. I'm returning it. The example would be matzah. I stole not matzah, chametz. I stole some bread from you before Pesach. After Pesach, I would give it back to you. It's chametz shavuot Pesach. Can't have enough from it. Is that considered returned or not? So Rabbi Yaakov says apparently you could. Rabbi Yaakov says, is that the machlokas over here? And it seems like a strange thing, but you can get away with it. Rabbi says, everybody says, in the case of chametz, I stole chametz from you before Pesach and I returned it after Pesach. I'm returning your chametz. What do you want from me? Everybody says, I didn't do anything to it. I just kept it. In fact, I went away. I was on vacation. I went on a Pesach program, came back, the bread was still there. I'm returning to you the same thing I took. So everybody says you could do that. Even Rav Yaakov Dim Cain, if the machlokes would be, can you say Harei Shachol Fadech? I'm just giving here's your item. If the machlok is can I do that by something that's usher ba'anah now? If that would be the machlok, then can niflu chamet pesach? Let's argue there, and they don't argue there. Even the Rabbanan say, if I stole bread from you before Pesach and I returned it after Pesach, I returned it. I didn't do anything to the bread. Ella hacha b'gam dinasha, and therefore, what's the machlok over here? Over here, the machlokas, Rashi explains it, is that if something happened to Mela Bites, if I didn't do anything to the chametz, I stole the chametz. Now I'm returning it to you. I can do that. Everybody agrees with that. Here, though, I turned your animal over to the court, and I brought your animal to the court, and I did something wrong. The question is, can you complete the din, a judgment, in absentia, where the shore is not there? Right? When the shore's taken to court, how does this work? You claim my shore damaged you call me to court, right? Me, or I'm the shomer, or I'm the owner. Where's the animal? Maybe it wasn't my animal. What's the animal? Oh, this is the animal. Bring the animal to court too. You bring the animal to court. Can you complete the judgment on the animal without the person being there? With a person, if you could accuse me of damaging you or killing somebody or something, you got to bring me to court. You can't rule in absentia. You can't call I'm not there, right? Not like common law where they do have judgments in absentia, but here not in halacha. You have to be there, and you can't do. Yeah, the shore to court too. How do you know which shore it was? Maybe it's on my shore. It's not mine. What are you talking about? That's can you do it with a shore? Can you do it? That's exactly the machlokes. The Rabbanan say ain't din shel shore el b'fana. You got to do it in front of the Amri. They could say, the Amri could say, you give it to me. Hey, you return my shore. In other words, the Rabbanan say, once the animal's been sentenced, you can't, the shomer can't say, okay, I'm giving you back your animal. Because the owner could say, hey, you giving it back? It's not the question, did he give it back? Rashi explains, it's not the question. The question is that, hey, you giving it back to me? I could have sent it to Ohio. I would have sent it out to the forest and they wouldn't have gotten it. Why? Because they wouldn't be able to find it. They wouldn't be able to sentence the animal. The animal's not present. Hashta itvaseilator. Now you've seized my ox. Now you've given my ox over. You've seized my ox and given it over to court, and I can't fight with them. You've given it over to them, and the animal was present in the court. In the sense that now you've done something with your hands, be a dime. You've taken an action which has caused me a loss. So therefore, you can't return it to me now after you've taken my animal. It's like you say you've lobotomized it or something. You've taken my animal basically and killed the animal because you took it to court. That's not an answer because the animal could have been judged even in absentia. That's your question. The animal could have been held even if the animal's there. They could have done judgment anyway. I didn't do anything. Right? What did I do? Okay, the animal was in my charge, all right, and the animal did damage. But I'm giving you back your animal, just like giving you back the chametz after Pesach. I didn't do anything. Did it make a difference if I took it to court or not? No, the animal could have been judged in absentia too. Wouldn't have made any difference. You wouldn't have been able to get out of it by sending the animal to Ohio. My time Rabbanan. What's the reason why the Rabbanan say that you don't judge the animal without the animal being there? It says Hashor Yisakel v'gam ba'al v'yumas. That's the pasuk we had in pasuk Chavtes. The shore, if the shore kills, the shore is stoned, and the owner is also killed. It doesn't really mean that. Literally, it's some kofer yushus. So goes on to say, pays kofer. The way the owner is killed if he killed somebody, the same thing with the shore. Just like the owner, if you kill a person, he has to be there, he has to be able to defend himself. Offshore before him, only in front of him. An owner has to be there because he can make a claim. He can say, no, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was B'shogeg or whatever it was. He can counter the argument. El shore bartana. So what's the difference if the shore is there? The shore is not. The shore can't argue anyway. It can't argue. There's no point in the shore being there. In terms of identification, let's say he says, "I know it was your shore who did it." They know which shore it was, but he can't make any claim, and therefore, Rabbi Yaakov says it makes no difference if you were there or not, and therefore this is no difference than chametz b'Pesach. I stole your shore. I'm giving it back to you. Oh, there was a judgment against him. You're tough luck. Oh, Pesach passed, you're tough luck. The way Rashi explains it, the issue is, did I do something or not? If it happened Mamela, Rashi says, hey, the Surah Mamela also. Everybody agrees. Chametz Pesach, and you can't say anything, had you given it back to me? It makes no difference. It's not the issue, you didn't give it back to me now. He's giving it back to me now. He's giving him back the chametz after Pesach. He's giving back the animal after sentencing, right? But the difference is, but the animal, say, you've done something to it. You've taken this animal to court. Had you not taken it to court and given it back to me, even after it killed, I could have sent it away and it wouldn't have been judged because it has to be present at the court. Rav Yaakov doesn't have to be present at the court. That's not an answer. And therefore, it's just like chametz for Pesach, and you can return it, and everybody holds of even by Asr B'Hana, you can say Reish Chol Fanecha. So the issue is, did I do something or not? Now, the end of the Mishnah, we said the last part of the Mishnah said, again, repeating the last two lines of the Mishnah on the base, if you gave your animal to a shomer, whatever the kind of the four shomers it was, he takes the place of the owner. If the animal does damage now, the shomer has to pay Chatzi Nezek if it's a Tam, Nezek Shalem if it's a Mu'ed. Now, before we start this Gemara at the two dots, we're at the 2/3 of the way down on the page on Mem Hey Alf, we're at the two dots. Let's first turn the page over to Mem Hey Amid Beis. I hope it's the same volume for you people. Right? I'm turning the page. We're going to look at this Mishnah. This Mishnah is really a continuation of the last phrase of the that we just learned. The last phrase of the second part of the starting Mishnah. Kashubal Mosero. Now, what precautions does an owner have to take for him not to be responsible if his animal did damage? So let's say he tied the animal with its reins, with a cord, a rope, in a barn, or he locked the door, karoi, the average way. The yatz and the animal went out to hizik and he did damage. Rav Meir says this is what we call a shmira pchusa, an inferior shmira. It was the bare minimum. You did the minimum. You guarded the animal. You tied it up a little bit with a rope, or you locked the door, a door that could withstand a ruach mitsuya, an average wind, but it couldn't withstand a big wind, or it couldn't withstand an animal that ripped the rope off. So in that case, Rav Meir says you're chayiv. You're chayiv. That means you're chayiv if the animal did damage. If it killed, you'd be chayiv kofer. If the animal did damage, you'd be chayiv for the damages. And why? Because you did an average shmira. You didn't do what we call a shmira pchusa. You did an inferior shmira. You didn't really guard it well. Guarding it well means tie it up with a chain, with a metal chain, iron chain. That would be a good one. That's what Meir says. In general, this is in general for guarding it, whether the guard was the owner or a shomer. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, tam chayev. Listen to this. A tam who pays chatzi nezek is chayev. If he had an inferior protection. What was the word that I used? Inferior security. You didn't tie it up that well. A guarding that wasn't that well. You're chayiv, like Rav Meir. However, he argues, Rav Yehuda says, well, mu'ed is patur. Listen to this. If the animal's a mu'ed, more likely to do damage, but if you had a minimal guarding, a minimal protection, security, you secured it minimally, you're patur, which seems strange, right? Shenamar, based on the pasuk, we'll see v'lo yishmer ba'alav. It says, but because it says if you're imhoad shor, the pasuk says that if the animal became a mu'ed, if it damaged 3 times, right? Damaged 3 times, v'huad v'balav, and you testified against the owner. The pasuk says, v'mshor nagachum it mos shulsham. If it had already guarded, it already gored from the day before yesterday 3 times. V'huad v'balav v'lo yishmerenu, and you didn't watch it, and he killed. Then the shore is killed, and the owner has to pay kofar, etc. So it says v'lo yishmerenu balav. If he didn't guard it, V'shamru said this is guarded. In other words, even a minimal guarding for a mu'ed is good enough. Now this is based on the pasuk. Based on the pasuk, because the Gemara is going to explain at the end after this mission, the Gemara is going to go and explain the psukim. But the Rishon explain the spar for this. What sense does it make to say for a short time that pays chatzi nezek, if it was a minimal guard, not good enough, you have to pay. But for a mu'ed, which pays nezek shalom, he's a real gorer, he's a convicted, he's what we call a serial gorer, right? Then if you had a shmira pchusa, what's the spar? So some say, the Mefarshim say, Meiriya say that when the animal became a serial gorer, it's well known. They put a picture of the animal in the paper. They know that he's a serial gorer, and people know to guard themselves from the animal. In other words, it's not just that the owner has to guard it, people know to stay away from that animal. It's like if you walk around with a small dog, people aren't that careful. And then he attacks you, you're upset. But if you see one of those animals, a big, real tough animal that is always screaming at anybody who comes near your house, or he's got one of those muzzles on, so if he has a muzzle, you're in trouble already, right? Take that muzzle falls off, you're in bad shape. So people know to guard themselves. Therefore, a minimal guard is good enough. That's a svara to it, but it's really based on a pasuk. Yeah, you don't like it. Yeah. Rav Lezer says, "Ain't no shmira alasakin," and there's no such thing. There's no shmira, meaning no matter how good the shmira is, you're still responsible. You're still responsible. Now, responsible here, as we'll see, means you're responsible to pay the kofar, and you're responsible for the damages that he did, no matter what. There's no such thing you could say, well, he had a good guard, he had a bad guard. According to Yehuda, if you had any guard, you're okay. According to Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda on the Tam, if you had a minimal guard, that's not good enough. You needed a real good guard. If you had a good guard, then you're potter. Rav Lezer says, no, any guard is not good enough. An animal, the only thing that's going to keep an animal away from damaging you is you threaten him with a gun or a knife, like he says, if you hold a knife to him. Now, this is in terms of damaging. This is not in terms of responsibility of a shomer. Because by shomer, we know a shomer chinam is chayiv on pshi and negligence. A shomer socher, if he's paid, is chayiv on genev and aved as well as negligence, but he's potter from onsin. Only a shomer is chayiv on onsin. So if he did a good shmira, he wouldn't be responsible as a shomer. But in terms of the animal doing damage, if it's in his charge, he'd have to pay kofar accordingly. So we learned this Mishnah, so we understand here that Rav Meir holds that that a minimal guarding is not good enough for either one. Rav Yehuda says minimal guard is good enough for a mu'ed, not for a tam. And Rav Lezer says no guarding is good enough. Now let's go back to our Gemara and at the two dots on Mem Hey Amid Aleph, 2/3 of the way down. Tan Rabbanim. Arba nechnesu tachas habalim. These four shomrim take the place of the owner. If the owner gives them the charge of guarding this animal, either you borrowed it, or you were hired hand, or you were you got a shomer chinam or a sacher, they take the place of the owner and they're responsible. The four things that we always talk about. Hargu, if the animal killed while in the charge of these four, tam and nerag, the animal tam is killed, because as we learned, if you know that the animal killed somebody on purpose, he had kavana, then you're chayiv, the animal's killed either way. Uptur min kofer. However, we learned that a tam, even with intention, is patur from kofer. Mu'adin, if the animal was a mu'ed, was a serial gorer, then the animal's killed, just like even a tam is killed, and misham is killed, they pay kofer. The chayiv and the hafshad meishor labala. Listen to this. You also have to pay for returning the animal, besides the fact that the animal is killed, right? The animal's killed, or maybe you have to pay kofar. You also have to return the animal, right? You think that's like the case with the car. You borrowed a car from somebody, or you were hired to watch the car, and you did damage with the car. You have to pay for the damage, and you got to return the car. Maybe the car's damaged too. You got to return the animal. The Shemachin doesn't have to return it because presumably he did some shmir. He wasn't negligent. Okay. What's the case over here? Listen very carefully. You're talking about the four shomrim. If it's a tam or a mu'ed, either way, the animal is killed. If he kills somebody, right, the animal is killed. But the tam is put from kofar, the mu'ed is chayiv, and you have to return, as a shomer, you have to make good on the animal. If the animal is not here, you got to return the animal. If there's something happened to the animal, except the Shemachinam doesn't have to. The shore was killed, let's assume. We're talking about the shore was killed because the shore was stoned to death, right? If in your charge, the animal killed somebody. So either way, whether it's a tam or mu'ed, the animal is killed. So you have to possibly pay kofar if it's a mu'ed, and you gotta return the value of the shore. The shore was worth $200. You got to give $200 to the owner, except for Shemachinam. Presumably because he wasn't negligent. What's the case here? Listen carefully. If you guarded the animal, if you guarded the animal, they should also be potter. Why should they have to? He did a proper guarding. Why do you have to return the animal to why do you have to pay for it? You did a proper guarding. What's this idea? And you have to return the value of the animal. The animal's now been stoned. You have to return it. You have to pay for it because you're responsible. I don't get it. If you did a proper shmira, So they all should be potter from paying, not just the shemachinam. If they didn't guard it at all, if they didn't guard the animal, then the shemachinam was negligent. He should also be responsible to pay. The animal, you were told to watch this animal. You agreed to watch the animal. The animal went and killed somebody. You have to pay kofar if he's a mu'ay, or under your charge he gored several times, and the animal's now killed. So you were negligent. You didn't guard the animal also. You have to pay for the animal. Speaking where he guarded a minimal, an inferior guarding, like we talked in the Mishnah that Rav Meir said he didn't have a good guard, not a good guard, just a minimal guard. All he needs is a minimal guard because he wasn't negligent. I guarded it a little bit, I tied it up, I closed the door. He wasn't negligent, so he's potter. But the other one, they didn't fulfill their obligation. They have to guard it better. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute. We had a machlokas in the Mishnah that I just learned, the Mishnah on Beis. Amri, we say like this. Come on, who's this going? Ikra Meir. If we're saying goes like Rav Meir, then what? That says in the Mishnah that even a mu'ed, you can't have a shmir prusa, and that's why you say you have to pay. You have to pay the kofar because it's your responsibility. You have to pay because he didn't do a good job. You have to remember the Amar. And I'm Beis now. The Amar Shomer. Now, Rav Meir, besides the Mishnah and I'm Beis, which says that Rav Meir holds that a shmir prusa is not good, and everybody have to pay. He also holds in Bab Metzia that a socher. You see, it's very simple. Shomer chinam is only chayav on negligence. Shomer socher, if you're paid to watch it, you're chayav even on genev and aveda, right? That you need a higher degree of guarding. A shol is chayav on everything, even onsen. What about a socher, a renter? The renter is paying you. What's his responsibility? Like when you rent the car, do you want the full insurance? You want every insurance? They try to get you and all that stuff, right? He holds some circles like a shemachinam. A mayor holds a circles responsible like a shemachinam, meaning he's chayav only on negligence. If that's the case, so if you had a minimal guarding over here, you're saying what? What's the case here? You're saying it was a minimal guarding. So who's this going like? If it goes like a mayor that says minimal guarding is not good enough, right? Minimal guarding is not good enough. You're chayiv. So that's what he's saying. Mayor holds that a minimal guarding, because you need a good guard, otherwise you're chayiv. So, but he also says soker is like a shemachinam. So this nichus mishemachinam, the hasoker. But Meir also has in Bab Metzia that a soker has halacha like a shemachinam. So if you say it's going like a Meir, and he says over here that you're chayiv to pay. Why? Because you didn't have a good guard, right? That the mu'ed your chayiv is good. Okay, but a shemachinam, any guard is good enough, right? Any guarding is good enough. Fine, but if that's the case, why does it say everybody's chayiv to return the animal if the animal in their charge was stoned, except for shemachinam? Shouldn't be shemachinam, should be shemachinam and socher. The socher is like a shemachinam. So let's say chutz shemachinam v'socher. Ikra beauty, if it goes like a beauty who says what? That a minimal guard is good enough by a mu'ed. Remember, right? Mu'ed is good enough. Ikra beauty, but he also the socher is kanose socher. A socher is like a renter is like a hired guard. Okay, you're right. Shamachinam socher is not like shamachinam; it's like a nosa socher. That's why I say shkumsim. But for kulim b'moad and paturim and kofer, but you should say that they're all patul and kofer. Why? Because he holds that if you had a minimal guarding, that's what he said. This says Yishman. If you had no guard at all, then you're chayiv. But if you had a minimal guard, you should be patur. So b'kulim b'moad and paturim and kofer. They don't have to pay kofer, and they shouldn't have to pay. They shouldn't have to pay the kofer at all. Now, so who is this Mishnah going by? Who is it? Oh, it's really a Bryce. We said Tana Rabbanan. It says these four shum take the place of the owner, right? And they say if the animal killed, the animal is stoned. Okay, and if he's a mu'ed, he pays kofar. And they still have to return the animal or the value of the animal that was stoned. They have to return that to the owner because they were shomrim, except for shamachinam. Okay, was there a shmira or not? If there's no shmira, everybody should be chayiv to return. Even the shamachinam, if there's no shmira, they should be potter. The answer was there was a minimal shmira. Okay, minimal shmira, so it's good enough for shamachinam. But again, if you go like Rav Meir that holds the socher is like a shamachinam, you should say the shamachinam and the socher are potter from returning it because there was a minimal shmira there. And if it goes like a Yehuda says that a socher is like a nosei socher, and that's why it makes sense to say puts me shamachinam alone. But it said the other ones, if b'kulim b'muad, and it should say p'turli kofer, they shouldn't have to pay kofer. Why? Because there was a good enough a minimal guard is all you need. As the mission on this daf says on Amadeus Rabbi Yehuda Tam Chayev and Muay Potter. If you had a minimal guard, you don't have to pay. So you shouldn't have to pay for kofar either by Moed. Amar Rafuna Barchin Hamani Rab Lezer. Goes like Rab Lezer. Remember the last sheet Rab Lezer says there's no way to guard an animal. No shmir. You're always chayiv. The only way is with the guard. Okay. So it goes like Rab Lezer. Domer ain't no shmir elasakin. Ulinian socher sav like Rab Yehuda. When it comes to socher, he always like Rab Yehuda that a socher is like a shomer socher. That's why it's a shomer chinam. And therefore, socher dummy. And therefore, I'm Mishnah speaking about not where you did a fantastic guard, because a fantastic guard would absolve you of returning the animal. And here you say, or returning the value of the animal to the owner. And the Brisa said, you got to return the value of the animal to the owner. So what's it speaking about? It goes like, Rabbi Lezer says, there's really no shmirah for that. And therefore you're responsible in all cases of shoel, shomer socher, or socher. You're responsible to pay for it because there's nothing that's going to go to sakim. When it comes to socher, he holds like socher is like an osa socher. Except for Shemachinim, who he didn't, as long as he wasn't negligent, he doesn't have to return it. But everybody else has to return it because there's no way to guard it. In other words, your responsibility is very good. Okay, you don't have to. He couldn't say it's speaking about where you did a proper guard, because then you wouldn't have to return it. You wouldn't have to pay. If you did a proper guard, a shomer socher is only chayav on Geneva and Aveda. If he did a proper guard, at least he covered that. And still, you say the nosu socher and the socher has to return the value of the animal because he borrowed it or he was paid for it. I mean, he didn't borrow. He was paid, or either he paid as a renter, or he was paid. Either way, you have to return it. So we're speaking about there wasn't a good enough shmir there. That's what he means. That Reb Lezer goes to says ain't no shmir elasakin, meaning that there's no way to guard this animal, and therefore you're responsible even for a kofar. Meaning socher is like a beautiful dummy. Now Rashi says over here at the fourth line from the top of the page. Even if you had a shmir me'ula, but koshkein had a shmir plusa not rate with a shmir plusa mishmachim mishamin kofer. Uninian to make sure nami chayav and the leil shamer shmir me'ula, and he didn't have a good shmir. He only had a shmir plusa. But he can't say, he says with a not shmir me'ula lamatzimuk. He can't say speaking when he did a shmir me'ula feel or blazer. Dafka being in kofer you're chayiv because there's no way to guard it. The like shmir me'ula. He says there's no way to guard an animal. You're chayiv anyway. If you have the animals in your charge, you got to do everything you can. There's no way you're absolved because you did a good shmirah. There's no way to guard it except to shoot the animal or hold it at bay with a knife. But the Indian to make sure labalam turan done not true. Ma'av like Abi shmirah. Again, in terms of being responsible to return the value to the owner, you can't speak about shmirah. If you had a shmir rule, the socher wouldn't be responsible. No socher or socher would be responsible to return it. And since you say he has to pay him back, we're speaking more like we said, where there was a shmir plusa. The Shemachinim is potter, and everybody else is chayiv because there's no way to guard the animal, and you're responsible. Another answer, pardon?
What does it do with the pasuk of Lo Yishmerenu? There's no way. Then why does the Torah say?
The Gemara is going to explain that, and when we see the Gemara after the Mishnah. Abai Omer La'olam Rav Meir. Abai says really you could say it doesn't say it goes like Rav Lezer, and he holds like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to that a sofer is like a nosi sofer, and therefore he has to return it to the owner. He has to return the value to the owner if the animal is killed. Really, we're going like Rav Meir. But we said if Rav Meir, it doesn't work because Rav Meir holds that a sofer is like a shamachinim. So why does he say only the shamachinim doesn't have to return the value to the owner after the animal in the charge of the shomer was stoned? Sofer should be the same way. Over there in Bamitzia, Rabba Barafuna switches around Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda Shita. Batani Socher Ketzim Mishalem. Rav Meir Omer Kashamer Sachar. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kashamachinam. So he says that Rav Meir is the one who holds that is something like a Sachar, and therefore you could say that this price is going like Rav Meir. That you had a minimal guard. Minimal guard is good enough for a Shamachinam, but for everybody else, a minimal guard is not good enough. And therefore the mission goes simply like Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Belezer Masa Shoro the Shamachinam. Let's say you gave your shore to a shamachinim, hizik, and it did damage in his charge, chayiv, right? Assuming that he didn't guard it well enough. Huzik, but if the animal was damaged, then you're putter. Now why? Amri hechinim, what's the case? If you gave the animal to a shamachinim and he agreed to guard it against any damages, afilu huzik nami l'chayiv. Even if the animal was damaged, you should have to pay. He should have to pay the shomer. If he didn't guard it against damages, afilu hizik nami lifter. even if you didn't guard against damage, I'll guard it. I'll make sure it's not stolen. But if it does damage, I'm not going to be responsible. So he should be potter even if it did damage. So what's this business? If he gave it to a Shemachinam, if he did damage, the Shemachinam is responsible. If it was damage, he's not responsible. He accepted to guard it against damages. He knew this animal was a gorer. This was a tough animal, a vicious animal. And he knew it was that. Stam milsa, minastam, since you know the animal is a tough animal, it goes around hurting other animals. So I'll guard it to make sure it doesn't do damage at all, because I know it's a wild animal. I'll guard it for that. And if it did damage, therefore you're responsible because you took responsibility to guard it against it damaging others. But you didn't anticipate you didn't anticipate that other animals will damage it. If you're the tough animal on the block, you expect it to do damage. So I'll guard it to make sure it doesn't do damage to somebody else. But I didn't think I had to guard it against it being damaged by somebody. And that's what Rav Elazar was talking about that particular case. Now, the Mishnah we said before, we'll just quickly repeat it. Kosher ba'alav mosera. If the owner of an animal guarded it by a minimal, an inferior guard, by tying it up with its rein or something to the wall, or no b'fanav karoi, or he locked the door, but it wasn't an impossible lock to break, or the door could have been blown down in a strong wind. And he went because Rav Meir holds that either a tam or a mu'ed, again, except for possibly a shomachinam, but and we're not even talking about necessarily about a shom, we're talking about the owner over here. The owner is chayev to pay for damages and chayev for kofar if the animal killed a Jewish person. He's chayev because a minimal shmir is not good enough. We'll see based on the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda tam chayev mu'ed pater. And that doesn't sound right. A tam is chayev and a mu'ed is pater. Yes, shenemer leishman ba'alav b'shamru that's guarded. So and it only says that by a mu'ed. What about tam? Why don't we learn our tam from mu'ed? The Gemara is going to explain the psukim. There's no way to guard an animal. If you have an animal that's doing damage, you can't give any excuse and say, well, I guarded it minimally. No, the only way to guard it is by killing it or holding it at bay with a knife or something of that sort. You're responsible for that either way. And anyway, you do it responsible. A shomer, as we said before, if a shomer took the charge of an animal and it guarded it with a real good guard, a chain and everything, then maybe he's not responsible to return the animal to the owner. He did his shmirah. But in terms of responsibility for damages, yes, there's no way to protect an animal. Animals do damage. My time at what's Rebbe's reasoning? Savar, he holds like this. Stam shvarim, la b'cheske shmir kamech. A stam shore is not people don't guard it. In other words, people let their animals run around like dogs, right? They let their animals run around. They don't really guard them. Amar Rahman Hashem said, Tam, because you don't take care of your animal. Tam nechayev, you should guard your animal. Then he boiled shmir because you should at least have a minimal guard. Hadarama, then he said, then Hashem said, and if you don't guard it, gabi mu'ed, by mu'ed it says leishmerenu, then he boiled shmir ma'ula. In other words, Rameir says like this: stam azoi, like minastam, people don't guard their animals. So Hashem said, you know what? If he's a tam, you have to pay chatzi nezek, because you should have guarded it at least somewhat. Then the pasuk goes on, if he's a mu'ed, v'lo yishmerenu, and you didn't guard it even more, now that it's a mu'ed, you should have even a greater guard. You need a shmir ma'ula. By both tam and mu'ed, it says v'nogach, right? Or kiyigach. It says nigicha. So if by a mu'ed you need a good shmira, you need a good shmir by tam also. That's what our mayor says. If you had not a good shmir, you had an inferior shmira, an inferior guard, you're responsible either way. You have to have a good shmira for you not to be responsible for your animal. Okay, that's our mayor. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, stam shvar b'cheske shimur kamei. No, people guard their animals somewhat. They don't let them run wild in the streets. Amar Rahman Hashem said, Tam nisham, the boy is Tam should pay, the boy shmir mula. Why do you have to pay? If it's guarded, Tam, because you need it better. You don't need a minimal guard, you need a better guard. Then Hashem said, more v'lo yishmerenu gabi mu'ed, than av'lo shmir ma'ula. So wait a minute. When you're chayiv for, and when the pasuk says Tam you're chayiv chatzi nezek, that's because you need a good shmira, and you didn't have a proper shmira. And then it says by mu'ed, also again you need a shmir ma'ula. So why by both? It's an inclusion after inclusion. It's like a double positive is a negative. to tell me that me at a custom of shmir ma'ula, you don't need, when it comes to a mu'ed, you don't need a shmir ma'ula. The pshat that I told you before in the Meiri, that if he's a mu'ed, people know that he's a mu'ed and will guard themselves a little bit too, and therefore shmir. That's like darshaning time at a kraw. That's a nice explanation. It doesn't really make enough meaning of the halacha, so you can give a nice explanation. But basically, the pasuk tells you that it's because the Torah says by a tam you need a shmir ma'ula, and then it says again by mu'ed and ribe'achamir elamai, to tell you that by mu'ed you really don't need a shmir ma'ula. Even a good one is, even a minimal shmir is good enough. That's the case. Why don't you say that if by a mu'ed you don't need a good shmira, you don't need a good one by tam either? I mean, Rahman of Leishmena, the pasuk says by, where does it Leishmena? By mu'ed. There we have the mirach miyad, the zevel alacher. But you need it for the basic idea that it says if you don't guard it, then you're responsible. You need it for the basic pasuk itself. Let's say yishmor. When are you chayiv? You're chayiv nezek shalem if you didn't guard it. If lo yishmor, my below yishmor and knew it. Why not this? If you didn't guard the mu'ed, but the tam stays the way it is. The tam is chayiv if you didn't have chayiv v'hatzinezek, and if you didn't have a shmir ma'ula. But for a mu'ed, you don't need a shmira ma'ula. Even if you had a shmira mu'etas, that's good enough, right? A mu'ed is potter if he had a shmira at all. He's only chayiv if he didn't have a shmira, if he didn't have any shmira. But if he had a shmira pchusa, a mu'ed is also potter, even though he did damage to it. Now we said there's another sheet now. The Gemara says in the Mishnah we saw three sheetas, right? There's a three-way machlokas. Rav Meir says that a shmir mechusa is no good for either one, a tam or a mu'ed. You're chayiv you're chayiv unless you had a shmir ma'ula. Rav Yehuda says a shmir mechusa is good enough for a mu'ed, not good enough for a tam. Rav Lezer, even ma'ula, you're also chayiv. Now we have a fourth sheet. The time Rav Lezer ben Yaakov Omer echatam v'chem mu'ed sheshomer shmir mechusa potter. He says even a shmir mechusa is good for a tam or for a mu'ed. Rav Meir says that shmir mechusa is not good for either one. Rav Yehuda says that shmir mechusa is good enough for a mu'ed. Rav Lezer says, Rav Lezer ben Yaakov says, a shmir mechusa is good enough for a tam or. In other words, whether the animal's a tam or a mu'ed and you had a minimal shmira, you're potter. Shmir mechusa, you're potter. My time. Savlik Rav Yehuda, he also Rav Yehuda, I'm a mu'ed b'shmira mechusa sakil. He also Rav Yehuda says that a mu'ed is sufficient to have a shmira mechusa minimal shmira. He doesn't hold like that. He says daf yishmera only by a mu'ed, not by a tam. But we have Xer Shava says yigach by tam, yigach by mu'ed. So just like by mu'ed, a shmir plus is good enough. The same thing for a tam. Amravada barava. L'patra Rav Yehuda. Listen to this one. Rav Yehuda says that you're put on a shmir plus by a mu'ed. Elatzad ha'ada shabo. Avatzad tamas shemkom omedes. Listen carefully. Rav Yehuda said that a short tam you're chayv chatzinesik, right? Right? Unless you had a shmir ma'ula. A shmir plus is not good enough. If it's a mu'ed, then if you had a small shmir, it's good enough. So it's good enough. He says, yeah. But when he says it's good enough, it's only on the extra 50% of the mu'ed. But the tam part is still there. So if you had a shmir plusa on a mu'ed and the animal did damage, you're chayiv the first 50%, the chatzinezek, minaguf of the animal, because that's still intact. The animal still, that part of that. Because again, Rav Yehuda holds this difference. He says by a short time you need a shmir ma'ula. And if you didn't, you're chayiv b'chatzinesek. By a shor mu'ed, you don't need a plisa mul, you need a shmir plusa. So if your animal was a mu'ed and it damaged and had a shmir plusa, you'd be potter on the mu'ed part, but you'd still be chayiv on the tam part because the mu'ed is just an addition over the tam and the tam part's still there. Amarav, listen to this. Mu'ed lekaren yamin ain't mu'ed lekaren shmol. Let's say the animal normally goes. Most animals are righties, like people, I guess, and he normally damages with his right horn. So if he's a mu'ed for that, that's what he normally damages. He's not a mu'ed for the left horn. Now, Amri, Ali B'Raman. Now, Rashi tells us right away, Ali B'Raman, what's he teaching me over here? Everybody knows that. Even if a shore is a mu'ed to kill people, he's not a mu'ed to kill shores. We had that before. You're only mu'ed for this. So of course, he's the only mu'ed to run was right one. He's still the time for left one. He's not telling me that halacha. What he's telling me is, being in shmira, what's your responsibility? That's what he means. Amar Rav, mu'ed l'karen yamin, and mu'ed l'karen small. Amri, Ali B'Raman. If you're talking about shmira, the way Meir holds, Amar echatam v'echad mu'ed shmira mu'la boy. Either way, what's the difference? What's the difference? Either way, whether if it's a guard for the right one or a guard for the left one, It's the same thing. Either way, you need a shmir me'ula. Of course, in other words, it's a davar pashut that if he's a mu'id for the keren yamin, he has to pay chatzi nezek on the yamin. And then if he damages with his left horn, if he's a mu'id for the keren yamin, he has to pay nezek shalom, right? Nezek shalom. If he's a mu'id for the keren yamin, okay, and keren yamin he pays nezek shalom, and then he does it with the keren small, he's chatzi nezek. That's a davar pashut. Rab's not teaching me that halacha when he says mu'id the keren yamin ain't mu'id the keren small. He's talking about shmira. Maybe shmir for one is not the same as the other. Who's he going like? Both of them, whether it's a tam or a mu'ed, we're not talking about how much you have to pay the tashlumin. That's assuming, of course, for the one that he's a mu'ed for, pays nezek shalom, and for the one that he's a tam, he pays chatzi nezek. But the question is, what kind of a shmir do you need? For a mayor holds that both need the same shmira for a tam and mu'ed. If he goes like Rabbi Yehuda, Myra Karen small. Why does he talk about the Karen small? What that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you need a good shmira there because that's a tam. I feel being in nami is beit sam b'tamas, as we just said in the name of who? Of Ravada Barava. He said that even if he's a yamin and what, even on the yamin that he's a mu'ed, he still is a tam in terms of the shmira there, as Rabbi Yehuda says. For the tam part, you need a good shmira. For the mu'ed part, you don't need a good shmira. So I feel, even according to Yehuda, my recurrent small, I feel being in nami is beit sad tamas fis beit sad mu'edes. Why say that? If he's a mu'id for this mu'id for the right side, he's not a mu'id for the left side in terms of shmira. What do you mean? Even in the right side itself, there's both a tam and a mu'id, because we said that the tzad tamas remains the way it is. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a mu'id doesn't need a good shmira. A tam does. But the part of the mu'id that's still a tam, in other words, within the mu'id when you're chayiv nezek shalom, the first part that's chatzi nezek, for that you do need a shmira. So there's no difference between, even on the right side. What do you say? There's difference between the left side or the right side. Even on the right side, there's tam and there's mu'ed. On the tam part, you need a good shmira. On the mu'ed part, you don't need a good shmira. Amilon Kabir, he holds like a beautiful feel like Ravada Baraba. He doesn't hold the Ravada Baraba that says that Sad Thomas become a mess. In this case, right, where you have the right side. In other words, in this case, this is the only case where you have where there's a tam and a mu'ed together. Rashi says, "Lesser Rav Ella legami poter be'Rabbi Rav Shapiro Rav the chiyai gavin mishkachet tzad tamas medes b'chatura." How can you have a tzad tam and a tzad mu'ed? In other words, on the right side you don't need a good shmira. On the left side you do. Why? Because the right side is a mu'ed. The left side is a tam. The tam part needs a good shmira. The right side doesn't. Well, in shmira, the shmira plus, if you guarded the whole animal with a inferior shmira, the hisik, and he did damage, but carrying him in your potter, right? Legamri, then bismol misham chatzinesik. He doesn't know like a Ravada Barava that says that even the mu'ed, even when he becomes a mu'ed, the tzad tam stays the way it is. He doesn't hold to that. If he's a mu'ed, he's a mu'ed. He's a tam, he's a tam. Now listen, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? That if you have a mu'ed, a minimal shmira is good enough. If you have a tam, you need a good shmira, otherwise you're chayiv. So if this animal, listen, was a mu'ed that he always damaged with his right horn, and he didn't damage with his left horn, and now you had a minimal guard. Now, if this animal damaged with his right horn, you're putter, because he had a minimal guard. If he damaged with his left horn, you're chayiv chatzi nezek, because that needs a good guard. That's the point. It doesn't make sense. But that goes back to the original item. How does a tam be more chayiv than a mu'ed? So the answer is like you got him, but that's based on the pasuk. But that's what he's saying. Again, back in the Gemara. Back on the second line from the second line from the bottom page. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda that a tam is chayiv, and for the time you need a good shmir from mu'ed, you don't. But low sphere later on, he doesn't know Ravada Barava that even when he becomes a mu'ed, that tam stays there originally. If the right side is a mu'ed because he normally damages with his right horn, he's a mu'ed legamri, and you don't need a good shmir there. You know, a lousy shmir is good enough. Ki hai gavna. This is the only case. The Mishal Beit says when the animal's right horn damages and the left horn doesn't. That's an example. That's a case where you have a tam and a mu'ed in the same animal in terms of shmira. Of course, we understand in terms of chatzi nezek and nezek shalom. The animal this animal, let's say, always kills people and doesn't kill shore. It doesn't kill shore. So he's a mu'ed if he kills a person, he's a mu'ed. If he kills a shore, he's a tam. That we understand. But in terms of shmira, where do you have that? You guard an animal, you guard an animal. If you guard an animal minimally, and he damaged with his right horn for which he was a mu'ed, that's good enough. You're putter. You don't pay anything. But if he did gored with his left horn, again, goes against logic, Moshe. It goes against logic. If he guarded with his left horn, he'd be chayiv chatzi nezik. Why? Because he didn't have a good shmira. Avol at the top of the page, avol mu'ed legamrei. If he's a total mu'ed for everything, lo mishkach levet samusakla. You don't have any time at all. There's no time at all. It's only in this case. Rav Lezer Amar Ein Yol Shmir Lasakim. Amar Rabba, this will answer your question. Amar Rabba, my time, Rabba. What's Rav Lezer's reasoning? Why there's only a guard? What does that mean? There's no way to guard it. What does that mean? The Amar pasuk is v'lo yishmerenu, right? It says again that same pasuk. I'm sure not going to shamvu v'lo yishmerenu. You know what yishmerenu means? Shumei lishmira. If he's guarded 3 times, there's no way to guard this animal. That's it. There's no way to guard the animal. You got to hold it at bay with a knife. How's that? Amalei Abaye. What do you mean? Just the thing lo yishmerenu means there's no way to guard it. Amalei Abaye elamiyata the sib lo yichasenu by a boar. Right? If you yiftach ish bor, the pasuk says if you open up a bor, right? Kiftach ish bor somewhere over here. Kiftach ish bor, yichri ish bor. You dig it, v'lo yichasenin. You don't cover it up, and it goes damaged. Does it also mean shumein lo kisi? Does it also mean lo yishmer means there's no way to guard it anymore? It also means there's no way to cover it up. Of course, you can cover it up. There's no way to cover it up. We learned kiso kroi. If you covered up the pit properly, despite your covering it up, an animal fell in there amazed, you're potter because you did properly cover it up. Elam Rabbi, Hainatam knows what's Rav Lezer's reason. Tanya, Rav Nassim, Rav Minayin, so you got Adam Kelev Rabbatov Beso. How do you know that it's forbidden for you to raise a vicious animal in your house? And you shouldn't set up a shaky ladder in your house that can kill people. Don't put any blood in your house. In other words, don't put any dangerous items in your house like vicious dogs or shaky ladders. That's his reasoning for it. And therefore he says there's no way to say, there's no excuse to say, well, I guarded the animal. Your animal does damage, you have to pay. Your animal kills, you have to pay kofar. Understand? The only time that's an excuse that you guarded it is if you're a shomer. And you're a shomer and you guarded it properly, more than a shemachinam. You were a shomer or you really took tremendous precautions against it, then you're potter from returning it. Except, of course, a shol is chayiv and everything except Mesik Adar. Tomorrow, Mitzvah, we'll start the new parak. Have a good day. Shavua tov l'kulam.
Shavua tov, beautiful.
What? Huh?
Didn't we have this Gemara before, but they didn't kill it?
We discounted that. He wanted to say, is the reason why Rabbi Lezer says, because of lo yishmerenu, there's no way to guard it. Lo yishmerenu doesn't mean there's no way to guard it. It means that you didn't guard it. Just like lo yichasenu means, yeah. So how does he?
The question was, what does he do with the puppy? It has to mean something.
Oh, because but slow sasum dam beisacha. Lo yishmerenu means how does he? What does he do with the pasuk? Lo yishmerenu, right? Yeah. I guess it's not. What is Rav Lezer going to do with that pasuk? Lo yishmerenu, because the pasuk is not speaking about a shomer. It's talking about just a regular guy. What are you going to do with it? There's no way to guard it. Yeah. I guess there's no. You can't guard it properly. So but he discounts that pshat, right? Because it says otherwise lo yichasen should also mean that, right?
And anyway, it should have been lo yishamer. Whatever.
Yeah. Just, good, very good. It's a good point. Thank you. I got it.
I'm trying to figure out how you watch half an animal. On this side, you really lock the door. On that side, you don't lock.
No, you guard it.